So rethinking your ministry. And so I'm going to talk for a few minutes about rethinking our kids' ministry. Now, I got to say from the outset that we have been in a very challenging season. Wouldn't you say? We've been in a very, very challenging season. And it does seem like, though, that we're rounding a corner. And I hear that more and more churches are going to do their kids' ministry in full swing this summer. I hear churches, for the first time in 2 years, actually doing Vacation Bible School in person. A lot of churches have done VBS virtually. They've done it in backyards. They've done it outside. And this year, it seems like we're turning that corner from this challenging season, and it's a good thing. It really is a good thing. But, during the COVID, if you want to call it that, the pandemic and all of those types of things, I think we did learn some things during that challenging time, or I hope we did. I really hope that you can reflect back and think of, some of the things that you learned during COVID. And as I share a couple of things that I hope that we as a group of ministry leaders learned, I want to invite you to write those in the chat box. Jan, if you don't mind, monitor those for me, and we can share those after a few minutes after I share a few things that I think that I hope collectively we've learned. First of all, we've learned that business was not going to be going back to normal. So I hope we've learned the fact that we're not going to be doing kids ministry like we did it before. I think that we've learned some really important things that I hope that we're going to carry on that we'll be calling the new normal. I'm calling that in my church. We've got some things that we're going to do, but it's the new normal. And so, which is not a bad thing. So, first of all, business is not going to go back to business as usual. Second thing I think we've learned is that we've learned new skills. It's funny, during COVID, I got to talk to lots of kids ministry leaders, and some of the things that you all learned was how to do Sunday school, how to do your small groups with kids online, how you did it digitally. And that is a big skill. Some of you learned perhaps how to do PowerPoint for the first time. Some of you learned how to do a scavenger hunt while keeping the kids' attention, on a digital platform. So I think during COVID and our pandemic time, we learned some new skills. Another thing I think we've learned how to be creative. We've learned to be even more creative, perhaps, than we were before. We learned to be creative online. I think we learned to be creative in helping parents disciple their children during COVID. I think we were creative in how to interact with parents and how to interact with kids. I saw, some churches, they actually did take-home bags where they packed up activity bags that they sent home to their kids so that they could be doing that during the morning worship when, parents were watching Zoom or watching live stream. The kids actually had bags that, that they had gotten from the church, and they, were able to engage the kids in spiritual things. So, during COVID, we learned how to be creative. And I think that was an awesome thing. And then I hope the big thing we learned is that we need to rethink kids ministry, what that's going to look like and what that's going to mean for the future. And it was something that I think was important that we learned to rethink how we do kids ministry. Anybody write anything in the chat, Jan? What they learned during COVID?
Community is important.
community is important. That's an awesome thing. Yes, we were very isolated and we learned community was important. Good. I like that.
That's all we got.
All right. Okay.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
if you think about, if you think about anything,
This one just came in.
okay.
Being creative and consistent with communication.
Yes, yes, we certainly did. We certainly did. We certainly did.
And that technology can be used for good.
That's right. That's right. We certainly did. And so those are all things that I hope that we not only we learned, but I hope that we can continue to embrace them. I hope that we can continue to embrace them. So what we did, we had a challenging season, but we learned some things in the midst of it all. And so tonight I'm going to camp out on 3 sacred cows. Have you ever heard that term, sacred cows? Well, that seems to have, and sacred cows seem to take hold in churches. And when I talk about sacred cows, I'm thinking about traditions or ways of thinking that can hold back our ministries from moving forward. These sacred cows sometimes become more important than the future of the ministry. And some sacred cows in a church might be, and if you can think of sacred cows, write them in the chat. But some sacred cows in the church that I thought about was the order of worship. Sometimes we're not willing to allow the order of worship to be changed because it's become a sacred cow. We're not going to touch it. You can't touch it. You can't mess with the order of worship. That's a no-no. And it becomes a sacred cow. The type of music sometimes churches play, you can only do, hymns, or you can only do contemporary music, or you can't have drums in the church. And sometimes those become sacred cows. The pews. Some churches are never going to change the pews because they become a sacred cow. That's something that we've always had. We're not going to do away with. We're keeping them. And so that's that. Certain rooms become, sacred cows. There are certain rooms in the church that, either the senior adult ladies have had forever. And they're not going to give up their room. They've got recliner chairs around the perimeter, and they're comfortable. And that sacred cow is not going to go away. So those are some sacred cows. And I joke, I laugh but it's true. I mean, to me, it amazes me that those sacred cows continue to remain taken hold in the church, but it's so true. There are sacred cows like that. Did anybody write any sacred cows in the chat?
I'm not sure. Okay. Lord's Supper only being taken in the building.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's something they're not going to move on it. It's a sacred cow. It's not going to happen. So yeah. So there are all sorts of things. I mean, you think into your own church. There's probably things in your own church and even in your kids' ministry that have become sacred cows, things that you're not going to mess with. You're not going to mess with that foyer. You're not going to mess with, Miss Prudence's, preschool room. We're not going to, mess with those cribs that look like little cages or anything. So there are some things even in our kids ministry that can, become a sacred cow. So think about those. And I hope that if you're a leader, you'll think, well, maybe we need to think about expanding, doing things a little differently and not allowing things to become, as I say, like sacred cows. So I want us to consider tonight just a couple of things about our kids ministry. I think that again have been changing due to COVID because we've been in this last couple of years, and I think we've been in a little bit of a flux. But so one of the things that I would say is that kids ministry is not childcare. And I hope that everybody on this webinar would say categorically, yes, kids ministry is not childcare. But fact of the matter is, for a lot of churches, kids ministry is childcare. And you might hear things like, if you want to help in childcare, there's a sign-up sheet in the foyer. And so sometimes we treat our kids ministry, like I said, just like childcare. But I'm here to say that kids ministry is not childcare. We need to change our thinking, and we need to help change the thinking of parents and other leaders in our church, and make sure that we're communicating about the importance of kids ministry, because that's what it is. It's kids ministry. And when I talk about kids ministry, I'm talking about the fact that, for our little ones, we're nurturing them. We're discipling them. And then we're also out there equipping their parents. We're decorating ministry spaces. We're planning lessons every single week. We're budgeting. So kids ministry is so much more than just childcare. And I hope that we remember that it is much more than childcare. As I just said, it's all about all of these things that you see listed there. And our ministry to our littles can't happen unless we're doing all of those things. And I like to say to people, and you know what? It takes a village. It doesn't take just one person or two persons. It takes a whole village of people. And so I think hopefully during COVID, I hope that the church has learned how important kids ministry is. Because, we are, we're nurturing future leaders. We're discipling perhaps future pastors, future deacons, future teachers, when we do ministry to our children, to the littlest of ours. It's important ministry. And so we need to make sure that that we change the thinking, and it has to start with me and with you. And then we need to make sure that it's following with everybody. Another thing I would say is that kids ministry volunteers are not just teachers. They're not just teachers, but I think that a lot of our ministry volunteers don't want to help in kids ministry, because a lot of times we say we're looking for teachers. We're looking for teachers in kids ministry. But we're really looking for kids ministry volunteers. And yeah, one of the roles that we play in kids ministry certainly is being a teacher. But I think we have to begin to change our thinking, and we have to, we have had challenges recruiting in our kids ministry, I think. And I think it's because we put so much emphasis on this teaching part of kids ministry that we forget that our kids ministry is so much more than teaching, so much more than teaching. Look at this list. Look at this list here. Kids ministry volunteers are all of these things. We're restroom aides. We're floaters. We're helping with registration and check-in. We're set designers when we're doing. Jan just spent a whole session talking about how we can design our ministry space to be more efficient and to be more attractive. Hallway security. Social media volunteers. We need people for audio visual. We need puppet people. We need crafters. We need letter writers, phone callers. We need people to encourage. We need diaper changers. We need snack preparers. We need fundraisers. And we could go on and on and on with all of the different roles that can happen in our kids' ministry. So we have to make sure that we change our thinking when it comes to, that kids ministry is just, we're only looking for teachers. Because fact of the matter is, we're looking for so much more than teachers. And I'm telling you, the people today, as we know, are stressed out and maxed out. And as leaders, we have to be able to say to people, I need somebody to do social media. It's not my thing, but there are probably people in your midst that love social media, and you might be able to recruit them to host your a group for your kids ministry, for your parents. You might have some older adults that can't get on their hands and knees anymore because they've aged. But you know what? They probably wouldn't mind writing letters, sending out birthday cards, maybe even texting and saying, hey, we missed you this week. We have people that, maybe come once or twice a month, but they would be willing, to be a floater, or they'd be willing to, work at the registration table before worship. And you have to begin to expand your thinking that maybe we need more people who can do smaller increments of time. But again, it starts with us. We need to rethink how we do ministry. And then the last thing I would say about rethinking our kids' ministry, and I'm going to hit this hard because I really believe this is so important, is that kids' ministry safety policies are not just for large churches. And, most of the churches that we have here in the Northeast are small churches. Some are less than 50. And I have gone into churches and I have heard a couple of things. I've heard we don't have the funds to do background checks. And then another thing I hear is we know everybody who's working with our kids. And so we don't need to do background checks. We don't need to worry about safety and security because everybody here is safe and secure. But I have to say, that's not true. Only takes one incident to happen to ruin a whole church's whole reputation. And so, and does background checks cost? It absolutely does cost. We pay our church, we have a church of 65 that worships on a Sunday morning. So we're a small church. We have under 100 members in our church. And, but we believe that, our littlest, should be protected. And we do background checks on everybody. We do them every 2 years. And we also do not only background checks, but we also have them fill out an application, and we actually call their references. So we go above and beyond, and calling their references and having them fill out an application costs, you know what it is? It costs us nothing. It costs somebody time who needs to call and make sure that those references can tell us a little bit about them and vouch for them. We also, in the state of Massachusetts, we have a system called a Coelho system, which is a check of our court system in the state of Massachusetts. And so that's another layer of security. But everybody in our church gets a national background check, because a Coelho check just with the state of Massachusetts is not sufficient, because all that does is, if you're in the state of Massachusetts and you've been in the court system, that'll flag you there. But if you've been outside of the state, or you've never had a problem with the court system in Massachusetts, then you wouldn't show up on any other background checks. And it costs us $20. And we've worked with our volunteers, and some of our volunteers say, I'll pay the $20, or we've paid 10 and they've paid 10. but it's so important that your church, step up to the plate and make sure that you're doing background checks for your volunteers. And, we do say, a lot of churches will say, but we know everybody, but you don't really, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors, in people's homes. And so the only way that we can make sure that that we take care of that is by doing background checks and making sure they're safe and secure. And it's an insurance issue. Most insurance companies want you to be doing background checks, and some actually will not. They will not insure you if you're not doing background checks. So you may want to check with the insurance company, because they may have deals too. They may have a deal where you can get background checks for $10. I don't know that, but you should check with your local insurance company that you use and ask them, what is their suggestion. And if you don't have our latest safety and security booklet, we've done a small booklet on safety and security. Write that in the chat and I'll send you a copy. It's a very small safety and security, but some of the small things that we can do is making sure we have 2 people unrelated in the room at all times, even during vacation Bible school. Every single one of your classes should have 2 adults or an adult and an older teenager in there, and they should make sure that they're not related, because again, that's another safety issue, is you need people that are not related, because if something does happen, they don't have to if when you go to court, they don't have to testify against each other. So it's so important that, you think about making sure that you have 2 people in the classroom at all times. And so I have a whole bunch of safety protocols, again, in our booklet that might help you do that. But I think, when COVID came, it reinforced some health and safety guidelines that really were important. Even Jan, talked about some of those. Even when you're decorating and when you're getting your classroom all set, we should make sure that every single time that, you have kids in a classroom, that when they play with toys, you should have a bucket right near your door and throw all of the kids' toys that have been used, and then they need to be sanitized. By the end of the class, one of your volunteers should go to the kitchen and spray them down with the bleach and the water solution, again, so that they can be sanitized. Get the kids involved in helping you sanitize the area before the end of class. Getting kids into the habit of washing their hands during class. Safety and security is for everybody. It's not just for the large churches. And we need to make sure that we have safety and security policies in place and that everybody is following them. That's why training is so very important when it comes to our ministry. We should be making sure that training's being done. So let me say, so I'm wrapping up now. It was quick, but I wanted to make sure that, you think about those 3 things, that first of all, that kids ministry isn't just childcare. It's so much more than childcare. Kids ministry is not just about being a teacher. It's so much more than that. And then kids ministry is so much more, than, we know everybody, but that safety and security is for everybody, and we need to be taking that seriously. So some things to keep in mind as I wrap up. For the bottom line, it's a new day, and we need to embrace the new day. We need to embrace the fact that we've learned how to do some new skills, and we need to try to bring that to our ministry, all the time. And if you want, and if you're thinking about this new day and embracing it, the only way it's going to work is if you work it. If you work it, you need to work it, and you need to help others to work it as well. We need to make sure that we're communicating our ministry in a new language. Maybe we should stop saying we're looking for, child care workers. Get that out of your brain. No more childcare. We do ministry. You can call it early education ministry, you can call it preschool ministry, but that's what we do. We do ministry, and we need to couch it in a different way. We're not looking for teachers. We're looking for preschool ministry volunteers or child volunteers. That's what we're looking for. And perhaps we need to be, again, saying it in a different way. We need to also ensure that the executive leadership of your church is on board and that they are making kids ministry a priority. And if they know how important that safety and security is, then they'll get behind the budget and make sure that you have money in order to get background checks. They need to make sure that they're on board with it. Because again, I think before COVID, sometimes our leadership, didn't have this high regard for kids ministry. But I think as more and more they realize, wow, our kids ministry folks stepped up to the plate big time. They know how important our kids are, and that needs to be a priority. Another bottom line, I think, is enlarge our recruiting effort. Include more individuals. Make sure that we're incorporating people with different gifts. It doesn't have to be the same people doing it, but, ask the Lord to show you people within your church that have different gifts. I forget if it was Alice or Jan talked about a bulletin board. Maybe there's somebody in your church that's creative and may never be able to do ministry because, again, they're getting older, or there's another ministry, but maybe they're creative and could come up with a bulletin board based on a theme that you have once a month. Get them involved. It doesn't have to be somebody who's willing to, be in your classes all the time. So utilize people with different gifts. And then finally, I would certainly say that making safety and security is non-negotiable. It just is. I think in this day and age, we have to make sure that, that's a priority. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. Or what's one big takeaway? Write it in the chat, a takeaway. Because again, I think that this is such an important part of ministry that we need to be rethinking how we're doing kids ministry. So please, if you have any comments or chats there, Jan can share those with me as we wrap up here. Or write your takeaways. Yep. Mm-hmm.
One said that background checks sometimes offend people, and it takes a special person in prayer for the person that's asking for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It really does. But I think that if your church makes it a policy, and, we're not targeting any one person, but it's something that the church says, hey, this is important, and everybody's doing it. I get background checked, every 2 years, and I'm okay with that. And you're right. You do have to couch it in the right way. And again, that's why I think if you're executive leadership, if you're pastor and deacons or church council, if everybody gets on board, then it's not so, it doesn't have to be so intrusive or that it would offend anybody. But that's a good comment. Thank you.
Catherine, I'm so glad that I am interested you in something, in upcycling.
Good. Good.
So Sandy, the other Sandy said there's a mission group out of state who wants to help with their VBS, and how do you handle background checks?
Yeah, that is a great question, Sandy. That's a great question. And I would ask them if they have their volunteers all background checked. And usually a lot of volunteer teams, Sandy, will already have them background checked. But see, that's a great question for you to be asking them, because it puts them on notice. Oh, wow, they take this seriously there, And if you're asking them to be background checked, you guys should now be thinking we need our people background checked too. So it is very important. Yes, everybody coming outside, because you don't know them, and you're not asking a lot of them to be background checked. So yeah, that's a good question, Sandy.
Catherine said that she did an out-of-state thing and had to be background checked.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's so important. So important. And a lot of time we send some students outside of the country just a couple of weeks ago with our Quest group, and they were all background checked. All those students were background checked before they went, because again, they're going to be on the field working with other people, and we want to make sure they're safe and secure. And I think it sends a message. It really does. And it sends a message to the people who are interested in coming to your church. Now, if they see on your website that all of your kids' ministry volunteers are background checked, that says something about you. That says that you take safety and security important. And like at our church, we put it on our website under our kids' ministry. Everybody knows that our people are background checked. Yep. Good. Great. Well, anytime you have anything, you certainly can reach out, because that's what we want to do. We want to be a resource for you. And I'll put my contact information up at the very end.